Hello and welcome to update number 15 for NIE. Honestly, we've had a ton done, and I'm hoping for this to be a video where I actually spend a lot of time editing it because just how much we've done. As you can see already right away, we have a bit of a loading screen as we go into our game, but that one's going to be changed to some intro videos as I eventually make those, or at least I'm going to switch out the loading throbber into something more proper for the game. That was probably a bit glitchy just because of me clicking on different screens to make a full screen, but we'll go ahead and go into this. Most importantly, when actually playing the game, all of this is one level. The option screen, the main menu, anything you can click on going into here, that's all one level. So now actually playing the game, you don't have to wait for it to buffer. You don't have to wait for it to bounce around. As you can see, there's a lot of different options. Technically, there is a way to click CPU or player 1, player 2, or CPU. Those don't actually do anything yet because I haven't implemented CPU controls. You can also see that now whenever you hover over or just move over various characters, it'll actually show which character they are, as well as the name of them at the bottom. So we have E, Champion of Cacophony, I, Champion of Annihilfest, N, Champion of Necromorph, and technically if you do a duplicate character, they have a different name. Here you have Nambi, Flame Jester, Moria, as they will eventually have fire-based powers. So I, Champion of Annihilfest, Insect, Phantom Conjurer. And then we have E, Champion of Cacophony, E-Comp, Mechanical Composer. Basically, you have their champion title, and then you have their title from when they're basically more of a normal citizen within their world. Additionally, since it's all one level, I had to find some interesting coding to make the sound only work when you're in this level, so you can still test out the sound meter, make sure that's working, make sure mute's working, make sure unmuting's working. Of course, all of this still works with changing your settings and it then saving the data. But also, as we go into this, we'll choose character N and we'll go ahead and choose character I. We also technically have a stage select screen. I only say technically because we, as of right now, only have one stage. But we click on our stage select and we get our actual loading screen. This is randomized between about 20 different loading screens right now. Gives you different tip advice, press down to block while you're on the ground. Loads us into the game. It's a bit glitchy as it goes towards it, but the async loading plugin is working really well for us. Another big one is I've changed the way that you actually change through your phases in this game. So before, when you would do this block, and if you got hit, you would pull the skeleton up again. It would start repeating the animation from the beginning. So I simply changed the way that the change phase event works to how it calls it, and it's checking to see if you actually would change phases. So throughout all of that, we have not changed phases. This next attack will most likely cause us to change phases as we hit 40%. We might need one more hit to go to the next phase, but boom! And then of course you get the repeat animation because you're actually going to a new phase. This was never an issue for the 3D forms for some reason. The 3D forms always work the same. Probably because they both run the same skeleton, so you're always going to be in the same place no matter what. Trying to think. Ooh, let's go back to character select. So also, since it's all one level, we do also have... Hey, we got the same tip, just different backgrounds. That's interesting. But point being, I'm also wondering if I have shuffle on, because I think I do. And otherwise, I guess that could cause issues, but it should be on still. Interesting. Give me a warning about my encoding overloading. So we'll see how well this video looks with all these load screens and everything. We'll want to pick character E, and doesn't really matter. We'll just go with 2 E's. Each character has a unique mad animation if they lose by timeout. Just the fact that I've been running to every one of these makes me wonder if the shuffle's not on. But I know it is from personal experience because I have tested this game out quite a bit. But you can also see on the tops now it says E, Champion of Cacophony, E, Comp, Mechanical Composer. All of this I'm pretty sure is still the same. There's just a lot more of you can press B to kind of go back to things. The more important thing is you can hover and cancel your hover now. So that's a big change that I've made into the game. I was going to change it just to just game screen, but I don't have a hotkey for that. And if I press off of this game screen, it's going to look really weird for a second. But yes, you can cancel hover. Maybe I'll be showing it more just full screen because I intend to edit this video and actually show off a lot more of the specifics. We'll return to character select again because there's one more thing I really remember to show off now that I'm looking at my Google Docs screen over here. Luckily, I can at least go over here and scroll through the various things I've done. So obviously the async screens is a big one for our changes. So we're going to N and again. You might have noticed one of the big things. One of the big things is now the character is purple for the secondary player. This is because of a critique I got when I was bringing them my game just to a general kind of playtest area. It was kind of hard to know which one was player 1 and player 2 once you kind of swap sides. This way, it's quite a bit more obvious. Maybe I'll begin tinting the screens at the top as well. Where did my mouse go? Let me pause so I can go off of it to just game, resume. As you can see, the non-beef flame jester up here is still very normal looking. I guess pausing and then going off the screen is a very good way of me doing this. But also, now when you're in 2D form, you actually have a bit of a rewind to doing your attack animation, which was always the intent from the beginning, it just kind of never was there. But boom, now you can rewind as you do your attack. Of course, the longer the attack takes to hit, the more stun it does. That's always been the way this move works. And boom. There was also a while where I was trying to get attacks to work on attack animation triggers, but that was having a really hard time working for some reason. Everything else about this is going to be really the same, the way that you gain controls, access controls. We'll go ahead and go back to main menu. Yeah, so I guess the animations are really randomized. Well, that's interesting how it's just doing that now, actually. Since I have the full game, but I don't just have a full screen. I need to make a full screen option that also doesn't have me on it. Well, that's also another thing. So, if you could chill on this screen for a second, technically it's 5 seconds right now, without movement, you go back to the main screen. You can cause that not to happen by pressing any buttons. For a while I had it working where by moving the mouse as well, but that seems to be kind of broken at the moment. It's fine. I'll see if I can fix that. If not, it's not that big of a deal because I'm going to change this to probably being 2 minutes. Obviously 5 seconds was just for the sake of testing. If you're in any other screen other than the main menu, that's never going to happen. If you're in options menu, it's never going to kick you back to the starting screen. It's purely only if you're on this screen. Let's see if issue where players win by draw by timeout. Both players win, both players heal up preventing the issue. Oh yeah, that was a weird one. That was just a matter of things not being where they should be. Let me see if I can get that done here. Playing 2 character ease is the best option. So issue where players win by draw, timeout. Yeah, so they would both have to be in 2D, and it would prevent healing. Well, preventing healing would stop this issue. Turns out that only happened in 2D form. It's fixed now. I don't quite remember what I did off the top of my head to fix it, but we'll go ahead and go through what this would mean. You know what? It would take a long time to do it here. Let's go ahead and go into the game. What it's basically saying is, in a normal fight, let's say we do this. Actually, let's go back to our options menu. 2 rounds, normal fight. Boom, F11. We'll go ahead and let that time out, but either way, the game won. What it's saying though is there was an issue for a while where if it was a draw by timeout and both players happened to be in 2D form, it would heal you up and then you would gain access of your characters again. So that doesn't happen anymore because basically there was not something working correctly where asking for, oh, do I go into the full loop maybe or no? I think it was because, oh yes, that's what it was. So it was on exit. F11, core game, characters. Let's just look at I again, 2D, higher pixel, because why not? Uh, animation blueprint. Cool. So what was happening is with taunting, there is an entering taunt and an exiting taunt event. When exiting taunt, which would activate no matter where you exit from, so even if you go to Foley 1, it would still give that point to let the game transition to the next round. Though, that should ideally not be happening anymore. Just trying to figure out where I changed it. Exiting taunt. Oh yeah, so cool. This is what I did. I just basically added a boolean. Is full mad false? If so, cool, we add the point still. Because within the anim events, the only thing that gets it to go over to Foley 1 is seeing if full win is true. If full win is true, it'll go over to Foley 1. And since Foley 1 has to be true to go over there, that will automatically make this event no longer work, so it'll no longer continue to go forward. Same thing with exiting mad, where it would add that point to the system. And that got that to fully work. From here, I'm going to be going through specific issues, so I'm going to start splitting up the video into parts. And let's begin looking at the specific changes I made that I may or may not have already gone over, but we'll go through them quickly. This portion is going to be about the phase change check. So, once again, we're going to be using character N to show up the phase change check. This is simply because it's the most obvious. Usually you'd be able to pull out your skeleton, and you'd have to do that every single time you block. Not anymore. The way it works now is you only really pull it out again, or repeat your animation, more importantly, when you go into a new phase. There is no more of that. It doesn't ever happen when you're in 3D form, because I believe it's just because 3D forms use the same exact skeleton. So, same issue, of course, across all stages. Pull out your skeleton, you don't need to re-pull it out every single time you get hit. Really, the only reason this change was made was because of the character N, because with all the other forms and all the other characters, their block animations have such little movement that it's not obvious. But we can look at the actual code for it. If I click on the right tab down here. There we go. Anywho, so this is going into character test. What we need to actually look at is the change face event. So up here, there's quite a few things that go into it, but importantly, as we start, we ask the health component quite a few things. We ask, hey, are we invincible? If we are not invincible, cool, we're allowed to continue. Then it asks if we're blocking. If we are blocking, we have to see if the change phase happens. If change phase is true, then we continue. If we are not blocking, we just continue as normal, and then there's other things along the line that will go, oh, are we blocking? And that will just skip this delay of 0.2 seconds of being visible or not visible. So, because if you're blocking, you'll always be visible. If you're not blocking, you have that 0.2 seconds of being invisible as you kind of stutter back. So the way this works is going into the health component, we have a set previous health parameter. This actually happens within all the damage components, any damage projectiles especially, as I like to call most of them, even though some of them attach to the bones, namely for character N's punch attack. It has this whole thing from the beginning where it gets, it gets the instigator, sees if it overlaps something other than the instigator. If that's true, do once, complete. Is it a character test, which is just the name of the character at this point, because even though I would ideally like to change it to something like NIE character, it causes a lot of issues when I try to change the name of it, and I've tried to change the name of it before, and it just was not a good time. It caused the entire thing to crash. If that cast fails, it goes back. This basically means if it hits another projectile, it can keep going forward. Otherwise, I would have to do something where it would just destroy itself anyway. And I could do that for certain projectiles or things if I want to to die when it hits something else, or instead of having projectiles go through each other like they currently do. It gets the hit stun, it casts it to that character that it is overlapping with. Um, it sets the previous health, which is what actually goes into the health component, getting the max health divided by the current health, set health before change, sets which phase it's in based on if it's over 80%, over 60%, over 40%, over 20%. And it's actually asking uh, over 80%, or is it under 80 and over 60, under 60 and over 40, under 40 and over 20, over 0 and under 20, or is it 0? Are they dead? So anywhere from phase 5 to phase 0. Because it does that, and then it delays it by a tick, which is very important because it gives it that little split second so you're not asking the previous health and the new health on the same exact frame. And then you do either your chip damage or normal damage, your change phase, destroy actor, and then once we go over here, character test, and maybe it happens on just to take damage as well then. Yes. So once you go through take damage or through healing, I believe it's on healing as well. It should be. Not that there's really many ways to heal, but they both end in the phase change check, which is on the event graph, mainly because I believe I needed a delay of some sort. Maybe I don't anymore. Maybe I figured it out because of the way things are working now. But you go into that phase change, you get your current health divided by your max health, and you get your current phase. Same questions over, like, is it over 80? Is it over 60? Under 80? Over 40? Under 60? Over 20? Under 40? Over 0? Under 20? Or is it 0 and under, technically, for death phase? And then you get your previous phase and your current phase. Are they equal? If they are not equal, you make change phase true. If they are false, change phase is false. And this is just some stuff to test that out with some print strings. Either way, it's working now, and characters change phases properly. The only downside is I will have to continue to add this little bit of the change phase check to every single damaging projectile or damage parameter in the game. But it's better than it not working, because it was honestly really annoying to have character N constantly pull the skeleton out of the ground. This was a very simple change that was actually very directly mentioned in the video. Basically, character N, when you pick them now, you have a purple form for your secondary phase, or your secondary character. This is just to make it more distinguishable, which one's player 1, which one's player 2, even as you go throughout all the phases. Though, with 2D phases, it was always pretty obvious, in my opinion, which one was which, because the red tint was still pretty strong. It just wasn't very strong in this form, which honestly took a while for me to figure out how I wanted to get that texture to work across all different phases, but I am glad it is working across all different phases. If I actually go to the textures for character N, I can actually show how that's done. Because the way that it's tinting is a bit weird, but it works. So, textures. Let's just look at N higher, why not? Look at the skin material. It just has a multiplier on it, which is different than I used to be doing for other textures. So if I look at character eyes, textures, higher. The way I've been doing tinting normally has been quite a bit different. Just look at the main skin as well. So it has been just a parameter of color. You add it to it, but with the default being black versus the default not having to be white because we're multiplying. And it's just a different parameter. Actually, it's the same parameter, but it's color. And yeah, so in the character test itself, it's just a matter of how it tints that color and how it does it. So it might be in the construction. I might have to look at the other specific parts too. But it's a matter of just what that color is. So the tint color for 2Ds is just this nice purple now. And then the dynamic ones for the 3D materials is just using this color N2, which I think is just because, because player 2 of character N. So we have a couple. We have color, which is just your normal red one that I've been using for the other two characters. Color N2, color Skelly, which is just used for the player 2 version of the skeleton, because as you can also see within the game, the 3D form of the skeleton is also pink now, but it's a lighter shade of pink because I didn't want it to be too pink. But of course, with the 2D form, since it's all just sprite animations, the pink carries over regardless into it, or the purple. Kind of like a hot pink purple, kind of inspired by Mundo a little bit. At least I think subconsciously inspired by Mundo from League of Legends. I've been playing a lot of that recently. And that is it for the changing of tint colors across character N. It was a bit of a task to get that done, but nice that I finally found a different way to do it. I tried applying this method to some of the other characters, especially to character E, because there's a bit of a glow that happened with the second phase, this specifically, where maybe doesn't look as metallic, but honestly, it was better than what the results I was getting otherwise, at least with my current knowledge of how to modify materials in here. So overall, I am much happier with keeping this like this, even though I would love for the vest to be orange in the other phases like it is in this one. So I might go back through and make some modifications of my own, whether that's making the vests orange on just very manually or some other method, but more than likely it's just going to stay like this. But I'm very happy with the results of this currently. I am actually surprised I forgot to mention because I didn't realize it was new, but you can now pause in game. And it actually works in the game because before I just had the M button working, and it still works technically in the editor. Though I'm not sure what then happens. Yeah, then it kind of just accidentally flip-flops this, because this is also, I'm pretty sure, on a flip-flop of some sort. Nope, it fixes itself eventually. Cool. But yeah, now you can mute and unmute the game in the pause menu. That's it for this change. The point of this one is just to show off the Omega level, as I call it, where all of these are one level, and this is actually in the playable version of the game. Additionally, I found a way to make it to where the audio only shows up when you're in this level, as well as if you're in any of the other two levels, it won't kick you back out to the press any to start screen, which of course it inevitably does after 5 seconds, which will eventually change to about 2 minutes. I also need to make a change to where the mouse does not start up in the top corner, but instead starts over here. That might lead to a different issue though, where the mouse, because every once in a while I see that there's a new mouse that pops up here, and that might appear in the middle of the screen, and that would be honestly even more distracting. So we'll see if I make that change or not, but we can show how I did the change to the audio. Let's go over to the Omega level because I believe it's just within this audio blueprint. So go over here. We have our whole loading the game. We have this thing that is broken right now for some reason. Maybe to get mouse position what it needs to be before, but it's doing its thing. Except it's not doing its thing. I don't know why it's not working, but ideally it should do that, and if it's false, it's supposed to reset it. If it's true, oh, maybe that's why, because the true's not resetting it. That might also be a thing that needs to happen. Alright, well, that might work now. I also just realized this is not in the scene mode, so I'll change that real quick. Anywho, that might have just solved that issue where the mouse was not resetting the timer. And we can test it out right now. Because that's something that works in the editor too. 1 Mississippi, 2 Mississippi, 3 Mississippi, 4 Mississippi, 5 Mississippi. And maybe it's working. I don't know. My mouse is kind of finicky. I have to like unplug my mouse every once in a while. Maybe if I was because I had it pressed on the screen. There we go. All right, cool. And if I press into it, I think you have to press the screen once for it to actually begin that timer outright, which is kind of against the point, but you win some, you lose some. Ideally, that timer should start off right away. 4 Mississippi, 2 Mississippi. Press the screen, 3 Mississippi, 4 Mississippi, 5 Mississippi. Oh yeah, this is definitely working. And then we don't move it for 5 seconds. And we let it kick us back out. Beautiful! And yeah, and of course it's the same thing here. But what I was going to show off was, of course, how the audio is working. But I'm glad we discovered that. That's the good thing about looking over your code randomly. Because I probably would not have looked over that soon if I wasn't for the sake of me making this video. Alright, plug back in the mouse. That's working cool. And this is just some spawner stuff with the filler characters. Because I went ahead and created a bunch of UI controls for game controls, UI controls, gamepad, face right, A, B, D, E, escape, P, S, W, UI for press any, which does not work, and we'll go over that, and then 2 mappings, the UI press any mapping, which just has the press any option and press any, and then UI standard mapping, which has everything else, has your WASD, has escape, has B, has P, just various things that I'm using. I might add NI and E to it just for the sake of the way it works right now is when you're in character select, you can press I, E, you press N as well. I just kind of just bounce it around, but that was my bad. No matter where your mouse is at, press N, boom, select your first character. E, select your second character. Easy peasy. Back to looking at the code again, and I will try not to bounce out of it again. So I realized I just did that like 3 times. As those 0 blue point, add show the mouse cursor. That might just be something I need to take out because there's no really need for me to say add show the mouse cursor, even though it's only showing for player controller 0. Set find camera component when target is in view. Gets the camera, adds the camera, sets the target with blend. Player 1 change, reconstruct. This is just some other bindings for the character selected. Reconstruct player 1 and player 2 as you select characters. This one was I was going to look up some stuff, but it just wasn't working the way I needed it to. Since those aren't connected to anything, I'll go ahead and delete them. And then this is the big one. So, cast to Omega fill character, blah, 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 bind to main menu. That's something, actually. You just bring the main menu. Or maybe this was me when I was still trying to get something to work. Not quite sure. The one we wanted to look at, though, since after we have Omega menu, pressing start says the focus. Add audio curve source component. Experimental stuff, I don't know. It works perfectly fine for me, so I'm fine with it being experimental, whatever. I saw like a YouTube video about it, and I was like, yep, cool. And I was like in Unreal Force. I don't know why it's still experimental at this point. The only thing is you'll have to actually select your audio within this. You can't really attach it to this because this is an actor node for some reason. But you add your sound, in this case, the sound cue. I set a variable from it. Option stage music. I guess I could have just called it option menu music, but option stage music works fine. There's a stop component. I just did stop because otherwise it begins automatically playing it. And I don't necessarily need that because we don't start off in that screen, nor do we ever start off in that screen. Omega UI, get the option menu from there, set a bind event to go to main menu, and a bind event to opening option menu. The reason I did it to the go to main menu is because that's already the only exit event, and that's already a call from there, so I didn't need to create a separate call just for the sake of exiting options menu because that serves as that. and then open main menu. Open main menu is binding to an event to play the option music and the option stage music that we selected over here. Play. You can technically pick a start time. Since the music's set to looping, it will actually loop no matter what. And then, of course, also binded to the go to main menu is this stop main menu, and it'll just stop the music, stop option menu music as the event. If we look at the UI for just the Omega, I need to clean that up a little bit more. I've already deleted a lot of things just because we don't need them anymore. Yeah, this is just a thing to retrigger in case something was held down, if a button was held down to retrigger that press any. Let me see. Yeah, just because there's a lot of binding here already, filling with the NIE start, all the main menu bindings for going to different screens, character select binding, option menu binding for the event go to main menu. Since that's already being used, that just goes to the go to the main menu option. And it goes to the, of course, then the open main menu event, which is its own thing, which also, means I can look at it this way. If I just click the go to options menu, that should open up the options menu. Oh wait, no, we gotta go to here to the end, to the options menu, open options menu. And that will open up options menu for us. You can see the call open options menu as a redirector or event dispatcher that's being called. And if at any point the button to get us out of here, the back button is clicked, it will call the go to main menu. And I've had to do a lot of weird things like this since I've added the new UI controls, but it makes the game work perfectly fine, and it allows the game to have all these UIs all on one screen and function properly, which is really, really good, and I'm glad it's actually working as well as it does. I very directly showed this issue in the game, or in the previous part of the demo, where you can win by timeout if both players were in 2D, and I already showed how we solved this. It was basically just by changing some parameters around. Let's make both players 2D. Because the issue was before is that it would actually begin healing the players and restoring them, and even though the screen would appear, you would be able to move the characters around. That no longer happens. We're good. I would have to open up quite a couple things to properly show off the differences, but I can just look once again at the 2D version of we'll go lower pixel this time, because why not? Because the reason this is happening is if you look at the locomotion events, going to taunt, it has this exit taunt, and the way that would work is it would cause you to gain the point to transition to the next round, and that would happen even if you go to fully won. But we fixed that by basically just having this, is full win true? If false, we continue. If that's true, we don't do anything, because you can only make it to fully won if full win is true. So therefore, you'll never have an issue with this code. Same thing with XMAD. You go here, you add your 3-print trans point, and boom, you have your transition point 1 of 3 that you need from one character, the other character, and the UI. You need 3 points to transition to the next round, but you need it from those 3 things in particular. And things are working. So that's it for this one. Once again, it was already shown more in depth within the main part of the video. This is another simple one. It was adding character names to the character select screen, as well as making it more obvious who you're selecting. Let me just go to just game mode. There we go. Just show off this a bit better. Making it more obvious who's picking. Initially, I just added these N and E, these big old letters to the screen. And then I eventually added these to the bottom, where you can actually see the name of the character, as well as this little thing where you can make them CPU or not. This one turned blue still? That is still blue. Okay, cool. That's actually what I wanted to happen. Cool, but either way, it highlights it and it changes the colors of them. We're not going to go that in depth on this one. It's just a lot of triggers, basically asking the game, hey, what character are we? And based on the character, it will change what this one is loaded in as. Same thing if you hover over it, if you move over. I'm hoping that I go back and change this to where if you're on the random, maybe it starts scrolling through them, something of that sort, just so it's a bit cooler. But for now, I am perfectly fine with this working the way it's working, even if it's not as cool. Also, you go to player 2, press that. If you go back from there, you go back to pressing character 1. Same thing if you just press character 2, you press B. You can also press back from over here, you go into player 1. If you get all the way over here, this will also take you back to player 1, and no matter what, if you press it twice, you go back to the normal select screen. Everything's working fine. Characters all also have a secondary name. If it's the player 2, you also get the secondary tint, even on this screen. But that's been like that for a while for the tints. Once again, you can already see that. Insect Phantom Conjurer. Might change that to Insect the Phantom Conjurer, but it's more just an ability and there's a title, and other people can probably do Phantom Conjuring within the bug race. Go back, and then Ecomp. And I already showed all of these off during the main part of the video, but we've made it more obvious who's picking. And while we do not have a confirmation for who having both players picked, like it's not like a thing in Smash Bros. Like, oh, you guys have both selected your characters. Are you ready to continue? Instead, we just have this this select screen, and this is kind of your last point where you can go backwards and be like, oh, you know what? Let's go change our characters. I want to reselect, and you guys can reselect your characters. Eventually, these will be on a toggle for like basically the left face button and top face button. So like triangle and square, or X and Y, depending on what system you're playing on, or whatever button. I have it for on keyboard, though of course you could always just use your mouse if you're playing on keyboard because it's there. Though I guess it would also still be cool to have the game fully playable where you don't need a mouse at all. Showing off some more loading screens, just kind of just gonna keep going through this. It's gonna be a bit glitchy, probably just because OBS is taking a lot of the energy as well, so it kind of freezes for a second. It's constantly giving me this error on OBS, being like something to do with the encoding. We're just going to keep going back and forth so you can see a couple of the different options. It gives you different tips. It comes to windscreen, display different images based on if the game is muted. It might be sometimes, I guess, a bit much to read in the short amount of time of the loading. It's about 11 seconds for loading to occur, or at least that's what I've mapped it out to. I currently don't have the thing on where you have it be -1, so no matter what, it kind of lasts as long as it needs to because I found it lasting actually a bit longer than it should. Kind of gives it time for this loading throbber down here to kind of run a few more cycles after it starts stuttering. That's interesting. It gave us the same one. Well, it is a 1 in 20 option, and unless it keeps doing that, I would not be surprised. And of course, we're not going in order like we were before, so that's good. So this is just kind of what this is looking like. We'll let it go through one more just for the sake of simplicity. Hopefully we'll see one with a NIE screen. No, we saw one with character, and we already saw a couple ones with the NIE screens and the different versions of NIE screens. Zombie's primary attack, Nambi's primary attack does more stun the longer it takes to hit. Awesome, cool. Though to get all that to work, it's pretty simple. We have our Async UI folder, has a bunch of different load screens that are all pretty big. They're all the same size as my monitor. At least I'm pretty sure they're the same size as my monitor. 2560 by 1440. And then all these throbbers from the loading animation I made. 31 frames. Go into project settings. Once you have the async plugin turned on, there will be this async loading screen option. Preload background images. I have that currently turned on, though it's not very necessary. It takes a bit more memory out of the game, so my game doesn't seem that heavy, so I think it's fine. I might turn it back off at some point. Shuffle is on. That's always a big one. Loading widget right now to sequence of images. If we go down here to the 31 elements, boom, it's all of them in order for the animation. So it's kind of like a giant looping animation. And then right now we are actually using the center loadout. When we enter on both areas, we just modified it to where the throbber is actually down in the corner, and the images themselves actually have the tips already on them. I can show that off in just a second. If we go still into the default loading screens, there should be a throbber setting. We already looked at that though. Background images would be the next important thing. Background. Right now it's an array of 20 images. There's 8 that are general. Some of them are just repeat tips, just with this version of the screen and that version of the letters. And that's how that's working right now. They're on fill. There's a lot of different options for it to scale to fit, scale to X to fit, scale to Y to fit, scale to fill. Um, ooh, that was bad. Anywho, well, that's that. And if we just look at one of the load images so you can see what I was talking about. Yeah, the tips are already on there. The reason we had to use the center version is because the video I was watching said that there were issues with Classic, and I tried using Classic, and yes, Classic does not work, or at least does not work properly right away from what I was finding. Maybe with the load all images turned on, that makes it work. But for now, it was like, oh, not big deal. So we just moved the throbber from over here to over here, mess with the scaling. Once again, if we look at the project settings and the async load screen, the way I got that to work, once I inputted all the images for the throbber, if I can find where that's at again, loading widgets, image, I used image sequence. I made the transformation for the throbber be 800 and 440. 440 on the Y makes it go 440 down, and then 800 makes it go 800 to the side, or that side technically, because it's camera's mirrored because it's pointing at me. And I have my scale currently set to 3.8 and 3.8. I had it at 4 for a bit. I even had it at 5 for a second, but I just messed with it enough to where the throbber's now at a point where it won't block any of my text, because the way I have my text working in general, let me find the longest tip. Well, it's 2 lines. It'll be this one. To make sure the throbber does not really cover these letters at all as the characters are moving, which is over here in this area. And in Photoshop, I have it to where the text is limited to only going this far anyway, because in Photoshop is where I've made all these. I do like a lot of the other ones where they can kind of interact, like where the character's behind the bottom line down here, but they go over this line up here, just to make it look a bit more dynamic. These are all working. I'm not sure if I'll really ever change these. I might change the press to start screen at some point, but I think having things like that consistent is good. Obviously, I need to change the main menu at some point so it's not just this gray background. I do like having the NIE logo down there. Now I gotta be careful again, because once we fix that mouse issue, yeah, it won't always go back to the screen. Sometimes I need to unplug my mouse just to make sure this works, because my mouse is kind of finicky and it'll cause things just to go back up here. But that is it for this update. Thank you so much for listening to me ramble. I believe that was all the issues. The only thing I didn't really cover at the end, now that I'm looking at it, is fixing the hover issue and adding hover canceling, though I already showed that off in the video, as it was a really cool thing. For what I have planned next, I don't have a lot planned right now for the next video, but I'll be figuring that out as I go, because of course I can always just start actually finally implementing all the other attacks in the game. Universal UI controls, I've already mostly implemented that with all the other screens. It's just adding that to the pause menu and probably adding those controls to the main game so you can get those controls when the pause menu is open. Adding UI controls for enhanced input array of functions. Yeah, that's already mostly existing, because if you, as I already showed off, core game controls, UI controls, that's what all of these are. That's what this one is. Just different options, basically adding that to the rest of my game, which is just the actual fighting level before I start adding other stages. Possibly adding 3 more stun poses. The reason for that is if I've been told that maybe it's a bit stagnant right now, because characters only have one reaction, they go back into their pose, no matter what stage they're in. It's always just that one pose of reaction. I think it's pretty fine, though. In the future, as you get to actual longer combos, I can definitely see the point where, yeah, them just constantly being stuck in one animation with no movement is a bit finicky, so maybe adding a bit of an animation to it as well, or something, just because I think especially the biggest issue, the biggest offender of that is character end, because of the higher stun and you hit from a distance. And it's kind of interesting to, in your mind, you can be like, oh, is the game broken right now? Because I've been stuck in stun forever, and it's hard to know that that's intentional, which is also why I added a tip screen, basically also just telling you, yeah, that's intentional. Adding quality options to this menu. That was something I originally planned to have in this video, but given how long everything else has taken, I wanted to get this video out before the year ended. And since I'm planning to edit this video, I knew that would take even longer. And I only have like technically like today and 2 days after I'm done filming this to get it done before New Year's Day. But adding quality levels and adding frame rate limiters or frame rate goals, probably having an option where it's just let the system do what it wants to do, and then something for the main menu, having the mouse not appear in the top part of the screen. We're going to want to more appear like right here when the game starts rather than appearing up here rather than drag it down. Though I'm wondering if that will lead me to another issue, because sometimes I know a second mouse spawns in for some reason and it's always up here. And if I cause the mouse to spawn down here, it might cause it to spawn down here. I don't know yet, but I am going to figure that out soon. But that's the goal. Those are what I have right now. I have some other things I could definitely continue to work on and do for my game. Just adding more polish to some menus. This is all pretty good. Adding a toggle to this, adding CPU controls is something I could definitely get towards doing. Adding more stages once I figure out if I want to modify the way pause controls work. And the only reason I want to do that is because all of this works normally until you have 2 controllers attached. I have not tested having 2 controllers attached yet for this, though ideally it should be working now perfectly fine, where both players can press B to go backwards with this. It's always worked perfectly fine for just normal play. The biggest issue has always been this screen. I would like it to where both players could press back on this, and that's my main goal. I have not tested it yet, and I should have. But yeah, hopefully everything's working, and if it's not, I've kind of made as many changes as I could, and there's a point where you can have to be just, I've done enough. I've done enough to try to fix this issue. Things are just going to have to work the way they're working. And that's where things are at right now with this update. Thank you guys once again so much for watching, and I hope you guys have a wonderful new year. Bye-bye.